the stars, for example, beryllium, which is a very toxic metal. And he proposes that metals like that were recombined when this Earth was born to form carbon, and through very complex chemical reactions. And carbon is the staff of all life, you know. And you know, we can transform things. We have the knowledge to do that and transform waste into valuable energy, you know, instead of wasting it.
All right, we're out of time, but again, it's very intriguing. Jack Leber, of course, comes onto the show frequent times, just telling us the new innovations, what's happening with pollution, and like I said, it's a Jewish idea also, making good out of the world and not destroying it. Jack, I want to thank you again for enlightening us, and hopefully people are listening how to turn this pollution into something very positive. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Shalom, welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Chabad House of Delmar, and we're going to talk about the theme that we've talked about before in the past, is the universe testifies, meaning that one of the major debates between science and religion is with their evolution or creation. Creation meaning that did God create the world in 6 days, or did it take hundreds of millions, billions of years to get to where we are today? Now, this goes on, and it's a very major debate. Of course, that we want to deal with it also because the divinity of man is, of course, founded on the idea that God made man in his image. You say that we're just evolution of different gases, and a billion years ago where our ancestors were monkeys, then kind of, you know, it has ramifications for our society. Are you going to act like a godly person, or are you going to act like just a big ape? So in any case, that's what the issue is today. It's been going on for hundreds of years. We'd like to continue it, and this we're going to talk about from this book by Rabbi Avigdor Miller. It's a major idea about evolution, so we have to get that firmly in place, that God made man. We're going to look at the universe, not just saying we're right, they're right. I mean, you never get anywhere with that idea, that debate. But we want to just show rationally with thought-provoking ideas that only a creator could have created this world and not just come together accidentally. It's with a feeling of awe and inadequacy that we approach the task of proposing in scientific terms the sequence of events in the universe which culminated in the appearance of life. That is from the National Geographic. When it comes to scientific terms, they are inadequate even to propose a sequence of imaginary events which the teachers and textbooks and magazines describe so confidently. The question therefore follows, if they are inadequate to propose a sequence of the postulated events, why are they so confident that the events ever took place? Is it because of evidence? We shall see. Is there any evidence at all? Darwin admitted the belief that an organ as perfect as the eye could have been formed by natural selection is more than enough to stagger anyone. Darwin knew almost nothing of the cell, which is even more cunningly organized. That was Darwin's concept of the eye. The mechanism of the DNA replication system would have overwhelmed him. More baffling still is how these proteins and genes got together in the first self-replicating cell. The odds against the right molecules being in the right place at the right time are staggering. Baffling and staggering. Yet these baffled and staggered men continue to assert confidently that it has actually happened by pure accident, although they have no shred of evidence on which to rely. The dividing of cells in a flower is an act of supreme design. Design is only by a designer. Supreme design is only by the supreme designer. The different ways of putting together all the elements in a set of human chromosomes would be the figure 256 followed by 2.4 billion zeros. This number of zeros, representing the probability of a happy accident, would fill well over 3,000 books of the size of the volume that is in our hand now, a book like this. This happened randomly, by pure chance. No, the theorists reply, not by pure chance, but by the inexorable laws of nature. Natural selection is not random, it is endlessly purposeful. But this is as meaningless an argument as saying that natural selection will preserve the strongest buildings when a hurricane comes. True, but will natural selection build the strongest buildings, or a building of any kind? Will a billion years of hurricane-shaped beams and arrange them to form even a simple hut? In plain words, stripped of literary jargon, evolution is claimed as a result of random mutation of the genes. Pure accident. Let us not for a moment forget this. Let us keep in mind that we are speaking not of one favorable accident out of millions of possible alternatives. We speak of billions of favorable accidents, each one of which is opposed by countless trillions of unfavorable alternatives. If you have 10 buttons numbered 1 to 10 in a bag, the probability of taking them out in that order, if each time when one is taken out it is returned to the bag, is 1 chance in 10 billion. But if there are 10 billion serially numbered buttons in the bag, what is the probability of taking them out in the numerical order? Even a single cell is an organization of enormously complicated and vastly purposeful design. Even one feature of the cell, the enzyme complex, is of endlessly intricate purposefulness. An enormous number of different enzymes are present in every cell. Each of these enzymes in itself a prodigious achievement. Each is precisely tailored to affect chemical reactions which in the laboratory would require drastic procedures such as boiling or treating with strong acids. Each enzyme is so cunningly constituted that it does not interfere with the function of the others. This represents a vast number of purposeful arrangements, each in the complexity of 1 to many tens of thousands, and each purposely designed to cooperate with the vast number of other enzymes in the cell. This staggering phenomenon of the cell enzymes is only a part of the story. Every cell possesses organelles and functions whose purposeful complexity beggars imagination. Consider the DNA replicating system. Every cell is equipped with this stunning marvel of foresight and ingenuity. One detail. A sequence of 1,000 nucleotides is required to encode an average-sized protein and the DNA apparatus. Each of these 1,000 nucleotides needs to be composed of a precise formula. Not only is this happy accident of particular composition, which is required for each nucleotide specifically, imagined to have occurred randomly 1,000 times, but also is claimed that the precise sequence of 1,000 graduated steps was the result of pure chance. To this they attempt a rejoinder. The survivors today represents the successes only, but not the failures. This means that countless billions of organisms of this family in the mythical long ago perished before the advent of the millions of lucky accidents which could enable the species to survive. But is there the slightest evidence to support such a staggering improbability? The fossil remains of these billions of unsuccessful forms should be in the rocks everywhere. Actually, there is nothing. In addition, this arrangement was entirely ineffective until it was completed. Did the cell initiate processes that were useless at that time in the hope that they would be perfected many millennia later? This irrational doctrine is confidently taught as fundamental truth. without the slightest evidence or logic to support it. Let us hear an evolutionist's reasoning. To get one strain with a favorable mutation, we would need to breed 1,000 strains. To get a strain with 2 favorable mutations, we would need to breed 1,000,000 strains, 1,000 squared. Any novelty of function requires a minimum of 1,000,000 favorable mutations, which could happen if we breed strains in numbers of 1,000 to the 1,000,000th power. No one would wager that anything so improbable could happen by pure accident. Yet it has happened thanks to the workings of natural selection. This mischievous irrationality is compounded by the fact of the interaction of the components of the living organism. Every living thing is composed of a great number of entities with particular characteristics of composition and function. All of these entities and their characteristics affect each other. There can be no change in one that does not affect all the others. A beneficial random change in even one component is a silly improbability. Then the contention that accidental changes occurred in all other components of the organism's fallacious cooperation is nothing less than an insane hallucination. In view of the supreme necessity that the constancy of the pH level be maintained, it is not surprising that an enormous number of regulatory mechanisms have evolved to maintain it. To the regimented academic mind which has lost contact with reality, it is not surprising. But to others, even the accidental advent of one regulatory mechanism is not only surprising, but is nonsense. The gibberish that it is not surprising that an enormous number of regulatory mechanisms have evolved demonstrates to what levels the paralyzed mind of the theorists have descended. It should be kept in mind that the evolution of living things is not only an insane improbability, but also that there is not the slightest proof that it ever happened. The complete lack of evidence is so glaring that no decent savant can attempt to conceal it. Now this is from Tempo and Mode in Evolution. The regular absence of transitional forms is not confined to mammals, but is an almost universal phenomenon as has been long noticed by paleontologists. The leading evolutionist declares that for all forms of life of today, or whichever existed, we lack the fossils which would justify the theory of transition from lower to higher forms. This lack of evidence is almost universal. In reality, we must delete the almost. The absence of evidence has long been noted, but has long been concealed and misrepresented by the great majority of theorists. The origin of rodents is obscure. No transitional forms are known. This is the major mystery of the history of life. The mystery is cleared up when one understands that there never were any intermediate forms because nothing evolved. The absence of any record whatsoever of a single member of any of the phyla in the Precambrian rocks remained as inexplicable as it was to Darwin. This actually means that the rocks are documented evidence that no previous life existed and that all life suddenly came into being. Like it says in the Tehillim, the Psalms, he spoke and it became, he commanded and it arose. One of the mysteries of botany is the way in which covered seed plants evolved from naked seed plants. So far, no fossils of intermediate plants have been found. We know there must have been a gradual change from one type to another. Well, what these in-between plants were like is unknown. They are missing links in the chain of plant life. The fossil evidence states clearly that there was no gradual change, yet the theorists know that there was. In some way we know not how plants arose or life arose, but they do not know what the first plants looked like. In reality we do know, for they are still here today. But the theorists refuse to acknowledge them as original forms, and they are therefore confronted by the mystery of the absence of the original forms which never existed. Fossils provide the only historical documentary evidence that life has evolved from simpler to more complex forms. That's from historical geology. Since that is the case, then the universally recognized lack of transitional fossils provide historical documentary evidence that life did not develop from simpler to more complex forms. The origin of birds is largely a matter of deduction. There is no fossil evidence as the stages through which the change from reptile to bird was achieved. This is from Biology and Comparative Physiology of Birds. But despite the open disproof furnished by the rocks, the evolutionists appeal to the rocks as their chief evidence. The most evident information concerning the history of plants and animals has been gained from examination of the fossils found in rocks. They do not know what the original forms look like, and they admit the universal absence of transitional forms, yet they claim to possess definite information and historical documentary evidence concerning the evolution of plants and animals. The fossil record does not tell us how fishes came into being. We can only guess as to the way in which the first fishes originated, but the fossils have not been found. And that's from the books of Fishes by Lanham. Historical documentary evidence, indeed. Evolution of Contemporary Botanical Thought says, I still think that to the unprejudiced fossil record of plants is in favor of special creation. Yet hearken to the reckless claims for the effectiveness of fossil evidence. Fossils have furnished an amazingly effective key to the effective positioning of the strata in widely separated regions. But the picture of the origin of fish is a vague one put together with fossilized fragments of bone with clues from the structures of other living things. Evidence is indirect. Interpretations vary. This is the living world of the sea. This means there is no evidence, merely wishful thinking, which puts together fragments at will to fit the purposes of the theorists. The interpretations vary because there is actually no evidence. The facts are that many species and genera, indeed the majority, differing sharply in many ways from any earlier group, and that the discontinuity is virtually universal as regards orders and all higher steps. This paleontological problem is of crucial interest. That's again from the book Tempo and Mode in Evolution. That the chain which connects the modern horse with the intermediate fossil horses has not been found even in one instance. The imaginary evolutionary pedigree of the horse, displayed with great prominence at Yale, was the pride and mainstay of the theorists. Many were won over to the theory by this display. Now it has fallen apart. The fact that the geological record shows a sudden emergence of many new forms, that in many cases intermediary links are missing, is a vexing problem. This is from Earth in Upheaval. It must be freely admitted that, although paleobotanical research has been in progress for more than 100 years, as yet we have not been able to trace the phylogenetic history of a single group of modern plants from the beginning to the present. And that's from an introduction to paleobotany. It remains true, as every paleontologist knows, that most new species and that nearly all new categories about the level of families appear in the record suddenly and are not led up to be known gradual, complete, continuous transitional sequences. Judging by the fossil record, there is no justification for the idea that any time elapsed between the monoclotidiones and the diclotidiones from the rocks that appear to have existed contemporaneously from the beginning. This is from the book Extinct Plants and Problems in Evolution. Both forms are found side by side in the same rock beds, but the theorists slice apart these strata in such manner as to create the impression that the two forms are not in the same stratum. But the open evidence of the rocks is clear. All was contemporaneous and nothing evolved. As time passes, the misinterpretations fall away, and the voice of the rocks becomes louder and clearer. This is from the Proceedings of American Philosophical Society. Experience shows that the gaps which separate the highest categories may never be bridged in the fossil record. Many of the discontinuities tend to be more and more emphasized with increased collection. A few paleontologists even today still cling to the idea that these gaps will be closed by further collecting, but most regard the observed discontinuities as real and have sought an explanation. An example of such explanation is that the rate of evolution was so rapid that there were but few individuals from whom to find fossils remains. The question presents itself: why in the past 5,000 years have we not witnessed an example of rapid evolution? To this they replied, the rate of evolution today is too gradual to be noticed. Only after hundreds of thousands of years can any perceptible change be noticed. This transparent excuse is veiled by very many sophisticated dissertations, but in effect it means that in the past the rate of evolution was too rapid to leave fossils, and today it is too gradual to be noticed. In ancient times, any species would disappear would probably be replaced by another just as interesting, or more so. But today's species are not being replaced. It is quite possible that in the future no conspicuous new large species of large animals will generate. Why not? The writer obviously is avoiding the question, why was evolution only in the shadowy past? Why did no conspicuous new species or even one new organ appear in recorded history? Actually, there is no mystery. No conspicuous new species ever generated, just as none are generating now. All forms were in existence from the beginning, after which some became extinct. One of the mainstays of evolution is the claim that everywhere the order of the rock strata demonstrates the development of living things from the simple to the complex. The public has been led to believe that the bottom strata contains fossils of the simplest and therefore the earliest forms. And as the geological column ascends, we find more highly developed and more complicated forms. But the discrepancy between the dictates of the theory of evolution and the actual facts is too glaring for any honest mind to ignore. The actual order of the strata, as we see them in superposition upon each other, very frequently contradicts the order required by the theory. There were so many instances where the supposedly older fossils are superimposed upon beds of supposedly recent fossils, it became clear that geology cannot be invoked as a support for the theory of evolution. What do the theories counter to open refutation? They reply, wherever the order of the strata is in discordance with the chronology of the evolution system, it constitutes the clearest evidence that the strata has been displaced. These instances frequently involve areas of hundreds of thousands of square miles. To overturn or otherwise displace such extensive surfaces would require mechanics beyond our ken, and no process can be imagined which would be capable of inverting many thousands of square miles of rock beds so that the older or previously deposited strata would lie uniformly on top of beds that had been laid down later. Even if we could conjure up in our minds the possibilities of such events, yet such upheavals should be expected to leave their impression. Yet the theories postulate such gigantic displacements even when there is not the slightest evidence of any disturbance to the rock beds. The wrong order of the fossils is in itself full and convincing evidence that the strata are not in their original position. Thus, the theorists can never lose. When the fossils are found in successive beds in accordance with their theory, these beds are considered comfortable in their original position. But when the order of the fossils contradict their theory, the beds are declared to have been displaced from their original position. The most incredible mechanical explanation to explain away the wrong order of the strata is more probable than the evolution of organic nature. The theorist's doctrine of the succession of the fossils should have been inverted in one country as compared with another. Any incredible explanation is preferable to denying the theory of evolution. Had these sections, which contain fossils in the wrong order and must therefore be considered as disturbed and misplaced, been planned for the purpose of deception, they could not have been more skillfully devised. And no one coming to this ground would suspect what appeared to be a normal stratigraphical sequence is not really so. This writer is forced to battle the testimony of his eyes, and for the sake of his allegiance to the religion of evolution, he turns his back on the open contradiction which stare him in the face. The angle of inclination acts exactly like the line of contact of two nearly horizontal formations, which viewed from the valley appear to succeed one another conformably. This writer too is agonizing against his good judgment because of the wrong order of the fossil beds. The thrust planes, meaning the postulated explanation that the beds were displaced by being subsequently thrust over each other or undo each other, look like planes or original bedding or were long so considered. This from the Manual of Geology. The verdict of decades of observation was overturned in order to explain away the wrong order of the fossils. It may be even said that in any case where there should appear to be a clear and decisive discordance between the physical evidence and paleontological evidence, the theories of the evolutionists as to what they claim came first, it is in the former that to be distrusted than the latter. This is from a book called Ancient Life History of Earth. This is the historical documented evidence of which the textbooks boast. The paleontological evidence is dream stuff. The clear and decisive evidence of the rocks testify against the theorists. The theories of what ought to be, according to the evolutionists, is given the precedence and is permitted to override testimony of the fossil strata. We may even demonstrate in some mountainous ground the strata had been turned completely upside down. If we can show that the fossils in what are now the uppermost layer ought properly, according to the theory of evolution, to lie underneath those in the beds below them. This is from the textbook of geology. Upon such rubbish the science of geology is founded. For this the writers are accorded glory and are knighted. The strata could scarcely be supposed to have been really inverted, save for the evidence as to their true order of succession, preached by the evolutionists, supplied by the included fossils. Portions of carbon strata appear as if regularly interbedded among Jurassic rocks, and indeed could not be separated, save after a study of their enclosed organic remains. The person must note that the rocks themselves, according to their composition, cannot be separated into different categories. They constitute one homogeneous layer without the slightest sign of differentiation or disturbance. But this uniform layer is